So, good morning, good afternoon, or again, good evening, depending on what time you happen to be watching this recording. So we now go to part 2 of the supply module, where we'll be talking about the law of supply. And, this is very similar to the law of demand. If there is a law for demand, then there is also the law of supply. Okay? And the background that we have today is an oil field. This is the Khurais oil field in Saudi Arabia. And as you know, Saudi Arabia is one of the largest producers of oil in the world. So we'll be using oil today and another case study as well to demonstrate the law of supply. So let's get started. As usual, let's start off with a recap. So we got the supply function, right? So the amount of goods supplied depends on these factors. So we've got the price of the good and all these other factors: price of inputs, technology, how many firms there are, the expectations of suppliers, natural or social factors like droughts, wars, and all of that, profitability of other goods in production, and prices of goods in joint supply. And we'll be talking about these one by one, as usual, okay? However, for now, just remember, because we've got a function, again, the word depends on, that function just means depends on, right? We can express this mathematically as this. Right, so once again, don't panic. Cos F just means this depends on. So the quantity supplied depends on all of these factors. That's what it means. So for this lecture, we will look at the effect of changing the price of the good. Just like in the law of demand, the law of supply tells us what happens to the quantity supplied when price changes. Okay? So once again, we will be taking the ceteris paribus approach, meaning we'll only be doing one thing at a time. We'll hold the rest constant, so price of inputs and all of that, all of these things will be held constant. Okay? It's only the price will be changing for this lecture. So then again, ceteris paribus is Latin for all other things being equal. Now, let's start with a case study of oil. So this is an oil well in Russia. And as you know, Russia is also one of those big players in oil. They're one of the biggest producers of oil. A lot of oil in Europe actually comes from Russia. So they're just one of the bigger producers. And we'll be using land drilling first, okay? So what happens to the amount of oil an oil well produces when price changes? And by the way, I'm using oil because oil is very, very reliant on price, okay? Which I'll explain in a bit. So let's have an oil company, which we call the oil company. I know, very imaginative. And let's say we've got a barrel of oil. Now, if you remember from our factors of production, right? Oil is our good. And from the factors of production module, we have 4 factors of production that we need to combine in order to create a barrel of oil, which, if you remember, is land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So all of these 4 combine together to make a barrel of oil. Okay? Now, what happens to the amount of oil that an oil produces when the price changes? Okay? So let's have a few thoughts first. So, factors of production, first of all, are not free. You can't just say we just need to keep producing stuff, because again, the more stuff we produce, the more factors of production we need to put into it, right? So factors of production are not free, right? So more oil means higher costs. We need to have more factors of production. Let's say we need to have more labor, okay? Because again, you need more people working. For example, if you want to produce more oil, then that means you need to have more workers work around the clock, which will increase costs. And also, another thing with oil especially, there's only a limited amount of oil in the ground, right? If you finish up your oil well, let's say if the price is low, and you sell all that oil for cheap, you're going to lose out on money later on when, let's say, the price of oil increases. So just remember these 2 things. The factors of production are not free, so therefore, if we want to produce, if we simply just can't produce as much oil as we can because there's more cost associated with it. And also, there's only a limited amount of oil in the ground, right? If that's used up, that's it. We can't sell any more oil, right? So the oil company has to actually be quite smart about how it uses its oil reserves. So let's have a case study example. So again, we're going to use arbitrary money. So let's say a barrel of oil costs 2 monies. And again, I'm just here to drill that concept down to you. This doesn't have to be a real life example of how much this is, okay? I don't want you to be bogged down by that. So we'll just use 2 monies, okay? Now, at this price, we can hire, let's say, three workers, all right? Or let's say the salary of three workers, and these three workers, working, they can produce 3 barrels of oil. Okay. Now you can say, well, let's just ramp up production, right? Let's make it 4 barrels of oil, since we can make more money. However, there's a problem. If we get 4 barrels of oil, that means we can't just produce that from three workers, because they're already at maximum capacity. We need to add another worker. However, because again, and when we add another worker, that means price will increase. So can't afford that at the current levels of price. Does that make sense? Because again, we're only making 2 monies per barrel of oil, and maybe the extra worker is just a bit more expensive, so we can't produce oil. We can't produce more oil. Remember, also law of diminishing returns, right? The more inputs we put in, the returns for each unit of input goes down. Just remember that from the previous from the factors of production lecture. So let's say we increase the price now to 3 money. So now we can afford to hire a fourth worker, which means we can now ramp up work production. And if we increase it furthermore, then maybe now we could employ a fifth worker, which means now we can produce 5 barrels of oil. However, if the price decreases to 1 money, that means we can't have all these workers, because again, we're not making enough money to to make it work. So we need to lay off some workers, and which means oil production will go down. Okay? So we've looked at the law of supply from the point of view of one company. Now let's have a think about other ways of producing oil. So other companies can produce oil in other ways. So for example, there's offshore drilling, right? The ocean or the sea has vast amounts of oil. And so we could send a rig out there and send some people out there to harvest the oil. Or there's fracking, if you're familiar with those kinds of oil technologies. And all of these have different costs associated with them. That's different from just having an oil well up in land. So how about offshore drilling? As a chemical engineer, I can actually tell you now that the salary of somebody working in that oil rig is a lot higher than somebody working in an oil well on land. For various reasons, okay? First of all, it's lonely out there. It's really lonely. You'll be stuck there for 3 to 6 months at a time, and literally the only people you'll be seeing are the people around you, and maybe perhaps a supply helicopter that comes in from time to time. So it's a really lonely job, okay? Next, there's also the higher safety risk. Remember, you're basically pumping oil, a very flammable material, in the middle of the ocean, okay? Something goes wrong, there's nowhere to run. Okay, so this is a very famous photo of Deepwater Horizon, which was an oil rig that basically caught on fire a few years ago, and they made a whole movie out of this. Okay, so well, the thing is, if your oil well caught on fire, you can run. For this one, if your oil rig catches on fire, yeah, you pretty much have to wait, because unless you want to jump into the ocean, there's there's a higher safety risk involved as well. And of course, Deepwater Horizon also had a lot of environmental effects, because there was an oil spill, right? The thing caught on fire, oil went everywhere, and it brought a lot of ecological damage. So from the point of view of a company, an oil well like this out in the middle of the ocean is a lot more expensive to run rather than just having oil on land. So their costs, how they decide on costs will be different. Okay, so let's have a look at that. So again, let's start off. This time, let's say a barrel of oil is 3 money's worth. And so we got first of all, the oil company, which drills oil on land, and we got the factors of production and oil production. So again, at 3 monies, they could hire four workers, and then at oil production, we get 4 oil. Okay, or you could think of the labor as a salary of 4 people. Okay, and you've got the other oil company, which at the current prices, even though they have, let's say this is the salary of 4 regular engineers, okay? Even though there might be less because we're paying them more, right, for each engineer, they could only produce 1, right? Because this is the salary of engineers, but this may not necessarily be the number of engineers that we have there, okay? So this is the oil production, because it's more expensive to produce 1 barrel of oil when you're in the middle of the sea. Okay, so that means the other oil company will have a different cost, will have different production based on cost. Okay, so we'll see what happens. So if we increase the price, so we already know for the land oil company, we already know that they're going to increase labor and then they're going to increase oil production to 5. For the other oil company, we can do this. They can do the same because it now costs oil now costs more, so there's more money in it. So we can hire an extra worker, something like that, and we increase the oil production. However, if we decrease the amount of money the oil barrel of oil sells for the oil company, we know they reduce, so they reduce. For the other oil company, they reduce too, but the oil production goes down 0. And so what's the point of them even hiring these workers if they're not even going to produce oil? So in the end, they just shut down or pause for a bit. Okay, so basically now what happens is because the barrel, so from another company's point of view, if the costs are low enough, then they just get out of the game. They get out of the business. If the costs are high enough, then some people get in. And a lot of oil wells actually think about it that way. The reason why I'm using oil is because it's such a beautiful case study where there are literally people out there. There's a podcast by NPR where they Planet Money, where they bought oil and then saw it from start to finish. And one of the things that they talked about there was a guy who owned 2 oil wells. Okay, and the other oil well is just he can open and close it anytime he wants to, but it all depends on the price of oil. If the price of oil goes high enough, I'm going to open production for that more oil. If it's not high enough, he's not going to open that. So it's another way to think of supply is it depends on the price. Some companies want in, some companies want out. Okay, so that's how it works. So let's have a look at that. So oil price and oil production. If we increase, so we got price and quantity supplied. If we increase the price, what did we see? Let's say from 3 monies to 4 monies, we saw oil production increase, so quantity supplied increased. If we decrease the price, like that, what happens to oil production? Oil production decreases. Okay, because again, it doesn't make sense to produce that much oil because to produce more oil, we need more costs, and if the profits we're making is not high enough to cover those costs, then it's not worth it. And this is what we call the law of supply. Basically, price and quantity have a direct relationship to each other. If price goes up, quantity supplied by the supplier goes up. If price goes down, quantity supplied goes down. Is that clear? I hope it is. And here's some notesy bits. So law of supply states that there is a positive relationship between the price of a good and its quantity supplied. So main reason again for the law of supply, we want to maximize profit. We cannot just for any given price, we cannot just produce up to infinity because the law of diminishing returns does not allow us to maximize profit. And companies, firms, basic theory, we want to maximize profit. Okay? And just like demand, there are 3 ways that we can represent the law of supply: a table, a graph, or an equation. So this is your supply curve, supply schedule, supply curve, and an algebraic equation. Okay, so supply schedule is basically a table, curve is basically a graph, and an equation is an equation. And just like demand, don't panic. This is an introductory economics thing. We are not going to be doing into the algebra. Okay, so all you have to do is thinking about are tables, or usually we just talk about curves. All right, so just like demand. So again, supply schedule is a tabular form, supply curve is a graphical form. So literally the same as in the demand lectures. And yeah. So just a recap, how we construct from a supply curve and a supply schedule. So this is literally the same as demand. Feel free, if you've already know this, feel free to skip like 2 minutes into the video. Honestly, it's just going to be me talking about how to make a graph from a table. So feel free to skip like 2 minutes. So, all right. So price, again, let's say we got a schedule, a supply schedule where for a given price, we get the quantity supplied. And again, just a warning, remember, because of how that economist who did supply and demand first did it, he put quantity supplied in the x-axis and price on the y-axis, even though it's supposed to be the other way around because it's a function, but we're not going to get into that. I've already told you why in demand. So what we need to do is we first need to flip. right? So x-axis, quantity supplied, price, y-axis. So we write quantity supplied to the left and then price to the right, so that we can easily graph this. Okay. All right. So let's bring in our table. So our graph. So x-axis we've got quantity supplied, and on the y-axis we've got the price. All right. Let's just wait for that. Okay. So let's start. So quantity supplied, we got 0, so that will be here, at the price of 1, so that will be here, right? 0, 1. All right. And then next, at the price of 2, we will be able to supply 350. So 350 somewhere between 300 and 400, so that will be there. Okay. Next, going on, at the price of 3, we get the quantity supplied of 550. So 550 somewhere there, 3 somewhere there. We draw together, and then we find a common where the two lines meet. That's how we graph it. Next, price of 4, quantity supplied is 700. So again, we do that. Price of 5, quantity supplied will be 800. So again, 5 there, 800 over there. So we draw 2 lines there, and so we get that. Okay. This is basically exactly the same thing as I've been doing with demand, right? So price of 6, quantity supplied is 900. And last, at the price of 7, the quantity supplied is 1,000. All right. So that's what it is. And then now we can draw a line, or we can draw a curve through this, and that will be our supply curve. Okay. And welcome back to anyone who decided to skip 2 minutes into the video. We just talked about how to graph this from a table. So yeah, welcome back. So the law of supply gives us an increasing trend. Okay, so as price increases, quantity supplied increase. So basically we have an increasing trend, and increasing just means it goes up. Okay. However, just like in demand, the law of supply only tells us the trend. It only tells us the graph has to go up. How it goes up, we don't know. Okay, you can determine that through various factors. We're not going to go through that here. You can take a whole microeconomics course in university if you want to, on how we actually determine what the supply curve looks like. Okay, just like demand. So this is fine. That is also that follows the supply curve, the law of supply. This red supply curve here, because again it's increasing. It doesn't tell us how it increases. It's just that it's increasing, right? And this linear one follows that as well, because again it's increasing as we increase the price, quantity supplied goes up, right? It goes down. So this all follows the law of supply. So just like law of demand, to make things easy, we'll use a linear curve. I know it sounds weird to say linear curve, but basically curve just means graph. Okay, so we'll use a linear curve. Okay, linear function if you want to in the future. So we'll be using a linear curve or linear function in future analysis to make things simpler. And again, concept. I'm here to tell you about the concepts that are relevant to supply, not necessarily exactly I'm here to tell you about how to describe these things, not necessarily this is how you compute for these things. Okay, so we'll just use this one now to give you an intuitive feel to supply. All right, and as I told you, we'll be having a bonus case study. Okay, because why not? So aside from oil, again, supply is a lot more versatile when it comes to talking about this. So let's use another case study. So hand sanitizer, and again, COVID season, right? So we're going to be using this. So why are breweries getting into the hand sanitizer business? So this is a brewery, I think it's a small time brewery in Atlanta, the USA. So we know from news articles, this basically the distilleries are going into the hand sanitizer business. Some of them are doing it to help out. Some of them are actually selling these things. Okay, and yeah, so that's what it is. So why are they getting to the hand sanitizer business? So if you remember from our oil study, right, it's basically because what's happening to the price of hand sanitizer right now. You can find Purell, which is hand sanitizer brand, for 10 times its normal price. Again, right? There's a shortage because everyone wants to have hand sanitizer right now, and so the price of hand sanitizer is racking up. Right, so for example, there's news from the UK, from the Guardian as well. Marks and Spencer, 11.50 for a bottle of hand sanitizer. And if you want to convert that to Philippine pesos, 700 pesos for a single bottle of hand sanitizer. And it's not even one of the big ones. It's just like one of those tiny bottles, okay? $8 hand sanitizers is from the Hill, and that's about 3,000, about 4,000 pesos. So you can see there's a lot of money that there's a lot of money in making hand sanitizer right now. And that's why companies want in, because there's more profit to make, right? Low supply, price goes up, supply goes up, either because companies want to supply more or other companies are getting into the business to supply the hand sanitizer. Okay, so price of hand sanitizer goes up. So let's see how it works. So hand sanitizer companies want to produce more hand sanitizer, low supply, right? So quantity supply goes up. Here's the thing though, Purell or other companies can't produce as much as the demand needs. Okay, they can only produce so much in the short term. Remember, there's capital required for this, right? You need to have the equipment to produce hand sanitizer. And so that means Purell or any other company a hand sanitizer company can't produce as much as the demand needs. So what happens? There's a shortage. And what happens to the price? If there's a shortage, it goes up even further. So what happens now? Other companies see an opportunity. We want in. So we're going to supply a hand sanitizer as well. Right? So that's how it works. However, here's another question. So that's just the law of supply. So here's another question. Who goes in first? Why are breweries going in first? Okay. Why not other companies? Say, why not Toyota? Okay, the car companies, why can't they go in first to hand sanitizer business? Why not Google, like tech giant, right? They got lots of money. Toyota and Google have lots of money. Or maybe even a bank. They literally are a bank, like BDO. Why can't they go in first? Or maybe a sportswear company, Adidas. Why Heineken or Stella, Sunmig? Why these breweries, right? And it all has to do with capital. Okay, these guys have stuff to make cars. These guys have stuff to make, service and all this. Adidas has stuff to make shoes. BDO has a manpower to provide banking services. So what's the main? So the key question is, what is the main ingredient of hand sanitizer? Alcohol. And who produces alcohol? Alcohol companies, breweries, right? So you could expect for them, the cost of entry is much lower. To get into the business, I don't need to change much. All I need to do is add some other ingredients. I mean, I'm already producing alcohol. I'm already producing the main ingredient. So now I could just do a little bit of shifting. It's still going to cost me money, but it's not a lot. And now I can make hand sanitizer. And so with this, you can think, well, who else produces alcohol? Oil companies. Oil companies also produce alcohol. So ExxonMobil, we don't have that in the Philippines, but it's one of the biggest oil companies in the world. Okay, it's right next to Shell, and they're actually neck and neck with Shell on who is the biggest company basically when it comes to assets. So ExxonMobil has now started making hand sanitizer, following liquor companies. Why? Because they can. It costs less for them compared to other businesses to get into the hand sanitizer business. Because low supply, price goes up. Companies want in to make a profit, so they go in, and quantity supplied also goes up. Okay, so that's what it is. So next time we'll be looking at the other factors. So today we've done price. Next time we'll be doing the other factors. And what happens when we change those other factors? What happens to quantity supplied? So thank you for listening, and you'll hear from me in the next lecture. Again, here are just some image credits. Thank you.